Hey guys, and welcome to another ArtifactCCG.com video, and today we are going to be covering the blue heroes. Just the heroes. We're not going to be doing the cards. We'll bring that up tomorrow, but for now, we're going to just continue this series in which I respond to some of Swim's ratings and give my own thoughts. So first off, we have Crystal Maiden, and let's just take a moment to appreciate the 2-5 stats, because that is so bad. It's like one more health than a melee creep. Oh man, so bad. But her aura is kind of cool. So the first time you play a spell in each lane, you're going to gain an additional 2 mana. And that could potentially see combo play in the future. And it's kind of decent with her spell Frostbite because it is cheap. So Frostbite dealing 2 damage to unit and disarming it this round isn't that high of an impact, and that's kind of a problem because you want most of your cards in Artifact to have high impact, because cards as a resource are a little bit more valuable when you have 3 lanes but only 2 cards per round. So it's a little bit unfortunate it does like so little, but at the same time, the way it works with her spell, it's basically a 1 mana cost ability. You could use it mainly to counter red heroes. You can argue that it counters black because obviously disarm them and your heroes don't die. But mainly I see it as a red counter because you turn off Duel and Berserker's Call if you disarm the unit. And those are kind of their main finishers. So if you have a long, drawn-out combo, maybe you're summoning a bunch of creeps or something, I don't know, you can start with Frostbite on their red hero. So you're not necessarily silencing them, but they can no longer duel or Berserker's Call to interrupt your combo. So I kind of like that. But ultimately, the 2-5 stat line is basically a little bit too much to overcome. She can't kill creeps. She dies to literally everything. So for now, I don't know that I'd give her as low as a 1.5 that Swim gave her, but I would definitely still keep her at maybe a 2.5, just because I do see her passive being potentially nuts. If you can somehow generate enough card draw or just save cards to the point where you pull off a crazy combo. Definitely, in my opinion, a round of 3 hero, just because at that point, maybe if you are running a combo to make use of her mana regen, you've generated, or you've drawn enough cards to make sure that you have stuff. And also, she's so weak, you don't want her on the board round 1 or round 2, really. You just want to keep her off the board, toss her into the final lane, use her global aura for the first 2 lanes, and pull off some neat tricks on the round of 5 mana. But beyond that, I don't know. Yeah, pretty bad. And next we have Earthshaker, who is once again 2 attack. Pretty prevalent in blue to see the low attack, although 2 is definitely the worst you can get. 7 health though, so at least he can survive 3 creep hits, and some heroes he can survive their first hit or 2. Well, I guess not 2. So still really extremely low health. But he does have a pretty cool active. So Fissure, with a cooldown of 4, is going to stun his enemy neighbors, which is really powerful if a bit random. If obviously Earthshaker isn't across from the heroes you'd like to stun, then it's not going to do anything. But still, stun is extremely powerful. Locking out your opponent from doing anything for that round and then being free to do whatever you may is pretty nice. I'd say the best use of it is tossing it into a lane without many creeps, just so you know that the stun is going to go off. Trying to get value out of it in a lane that's super wide is not going to work. But against the lane that is super wide, we have Echo Slam, which is 7 mana and deals damage to each enemy based off of the number of units in that lane, which is pretty cool. Very similar to his ultimate in Dota. But the problem with it is that at 7, it manages to cost more than most blue spells that are like board clears or whatever, and it's not really necessarily a better board clear because it's so unreliable. So in order to kill most heroes, you're gonna have to have like 8 units on the board, right? And like Echo Slam at that point, even with 8 units, it's not gonna kill a lot of heroes, especially if they have a robe on them, plus 4 health. Even at that point, Crystal Maiden would survive with just a single robe in late game to an Echo Slam, unless there are 9 units. So the problem is it doesn't kill heroes really. It can if they've been reduced health before, but as I said, it's just unreliable, which makes it hard to run Earthshaker because blue does have offer to much better wave clear. So why would you pick Earthshaker, who's going to give you a more expensive, less effective wave clear? The one advantage to this over some of the other wave clear you may have seen, such as Annihilation, is that obviously, unlike Annihilation, it doesn't kill yourself. And it does have a pretty crazy upside. But in any case, overall, just because of how inconsistent both Echo Slam and Fissure are, I'm going to have to keep him probably at a 2.5. I could see that rating increasing if there was a ton of wide decks and his Echo Slam basically did become a board clear every time. Then yeah, but right now I just don't see him as being better than some of the other blue heroes. Just inconsistent. And next we have the common hero for blue, Jamoy the Wise, with a very mediocre card, but also kind of decent. So Battlefield Control is going to choose a unit and choose a combat target for it. The nice thing is it can be both your units and your opponents. So if one of your blue squishy heroes is dying, you can save them with Battlefield Control, in theory, for relatively cheap. However, it doesn't do a whole lot, so it's kind of... It's always the problem with one-cost cards in Artifact is the opportunity cost. His effect is decent though. On an active 4, draw a card. That is a crazy high cooldown, but drawing a card at that point of the game can be really good. You know, it might hit your wave clear that you needed. But ultimately, he's not going to be strong enough for Constructed. He's decent if you just want to fill your deck out in Limited though. In that, Battlefield Control does become better because there are less answers to attack redirection and things like that, and you don't need all of your cards to have crazy high effects because they just won't all have crazy high effects in Limited. So there, I think he becomes a much better character. Game also goes longer, so you might get to use his effect twice. Not much to say. I think I'll just go ahead and agree with Swim's rating of 2.5. Moving on, we have, for once, a good blue hero. This is Kana with the mediocre stat line of 212. That is just amazing for blue because blue you don't really play for their attack, and their biggest weakness is dying before they can cast their spells. So just having that massive 12 health is really good for blue. Her passive is very interesting. It forces your melee creeps to spawn into her lane. Notice that that's only going to trigger if she's already on the board. So the turn that you're spawning her doesn't do anything, and then the next turn your melee creeps are going to go there. As far as how good that effect is, I'd say it's only as good as the player using Kana, or as bad as your opponent is. So basically, your opponent can take advantage of Kana pulling all the creeps away from the other lanes and potentially win the other 2 lanes a little bit easier. Or you can use it as you can use the effect wisely and kind of make up for the fact that your opponent could in theory play around it by placing her well. However, all that is kind of irrelevant when you take a look at her Prey on the Weak, which is summon a Hound of War for every damaged unit. And this is kind of, in my opinion, what makes her viable as a hero. Her ability to pull in creeps is neat, but I think it's kind of a wash just because both players can play around it. But Prey on the Weak has a pretty decent upside that is really easy to take advantage of. So first, it can be used just to block enemy units. Obviously, if they have any sort of wave clear, it's not going to be effective, but it's cheap. So if your opponent, goes and spends all their mana, maybe they dropped a Thunderite pack, you can just go Prey on the Weak, and you're going to block like all of their units, knowing that they can't wave clear. So that's one use. But I'd say that the more common use will be to push and pressure a tower, especially in contested ones. If you have, maybe 4 to 5 enemy units in a lane, and you toss out a Prey on a Weak, and you had 3 to 4 units, you're potentially spawning 4 to 6 of these 2/1 creeps, and then if you combo that with a buff effect, you're looking at a lot of damage for relatively cheap. It's a really, really powerful card, especially in combination with effects that happen at the beginning of the lane, like Conflagration. I really like Conflagration with Prey on the Weak because any enemy creeps that are in the lane will get damaged, and then for every enemy unit in the lane, you're spawning a Hound of War, which is pretty powerful. Overall, I'd probably agree with Swim's rating of 4.0. Her upside is really high, and I think that she belongs kind of, not in every blue deck necessarily, but in any blue deck that has some sort of way to combo with her Prey on the Weak. I think she's excellent. So bring cards that can deal damage to every enemy unit to combo with the Prey on the Weak, make her able to spawn more units, and then bring cards that can buff the damage of those hounds. Something like Sorlacon's Assault Ladders. You take a lane that is close, spawn 5 more creeps with an Assault Ladder there, and you're looking at potentially 20 more damage to the tower. Why is math so hard? It really isn't, but sometimes you second guess yourself. But yeah, that being said, if you don't have a way to buff the damage of the Hounds of War, I don't think she's quite as good. So I think she's anywhere from a 5 to 3, depending upon whether you bring the tools with her. So don't just play her blindly. Make sure you have something there to buff her units. Next up, we have Luna, who is another solid blue hero. As sad as it is, she's actually got one of the better stat lines at 3-8, up there with Jamoy and Kana. But the main thing about her is that she actually brings an extremely powerful card to the game. So Eclipse is going to repeat 1 time for each of the charge, and it's going to deal 3 piercing damage to a random enemy. And her charges are gained by her passive, which is Lucent Beam, and at the start of, or let's see, before the action phase, you get to deal 1 piercing damage to a random enemy unit. Coincidentally, if that hits a creep in front of Luna, it's kind of nice if she actually trades with creeps. Very uncommon in blue. But more importantly, that does charge the Eclipse. And the neat thing about Eclipse is that blue has plenty of access to wave clear, right? They have plenty of AoE damage, but sometimes blue can suffer from armor. When red units like Bristleback and Axe are in a lane and they have 2 to 4 armor, and you're trying to cast some of these spells, like, or maybe you have a Conflagration down, maybe you have some other spells in your hand, they're just not going to do a whole lot. Echo Slam gets kind of ruined by armor, but Eclipse comes along and is like, piercing damage, guys, 18 of it, and it just annihilates heroes. Really good for clearing out anything in front of you and allowing you to hit the tower. And the reason why it's important that it's piercing damage is because, as I was saying, there's plenty of other wave clear. So whereas Earthshaker brings wave clear that's kind of very similar to other cards in blue, Luna brings a card that isn't seen a lot, and that's piercing damage, or piercing AoE damage. And because it's a unique effect, it's worth having her in your lineup to bring her card into the list. Whereas some other blue heroes with other AoE spells, they don't offer something new. They don't offer more than what's already in the common cards. So that's where a hero like Luna, or as you'll see later, Zeus, gain this advantage from having the access to piercing damage, because then you can have both. So yeah, I definitely like her. The one thing I will say is, if she runs into some sort of hero killing list and she can't build charges fast enough, then Eclipse begins to look really bad. Or if your opponent buys a couple Stonehall Cloaks early on, it can become extremely terrible. Like, when your opponent's sitting there with a 20 health hero, it doesn't really matter how many charges of Eclipse you have. But overall, I'd have to say I'd give her probably just a 4. I don't know about that 4.5 that Swim gave her. As I said, while she is really good and there's lots of good about her, I think that the fact that Stonehall Cloaks are so good and will, in my opinion, be so prevalent, might set her back just a half notch at least, just because towards the end of the game where you really want Eclipse to work, they might already have way too much health for Eclipse to do anything. But still very, very solid blue hero. And next we have Meepo, the, I don't know, card you just want to be good but probably won't ever be good. So United We Fall is his big downside. Obviously, whenever one Meepo dies, all the Meepo dies. No matter what you do, it says that it ignores death shields. And then his card at 4 summons a Meepo, which is crazy because that Meepo is another blue hero, right? The problem is, killing a 5 health hero is not hard, and getting, health items onto all of their Meepos you summon isn't really feasible. Like, you can do it, but I mean, even then, they're 9 health, and at that point in the game, they can probably kill the 9 health Meepo anyways. So they kill one Meepo, and they get like 15, 20 gold, and buy a Vesture, and you're like, why do I have Meepos again? The one thing I will say is, if you can get Meepos, like, you just summon one Meepo, and you get them on alternating deaths, then it's good. So you toss a Meepo into a lane, and you're like, Annihilation, and that Meepo dies, and then you spawn a new Meepo next round, and you make sure that Meepo dies, and then your other Meepo comes in, then you're like you essentially have an extra blue hero. But if they ever spawn synchronously, then it's just, yeah, then you're back down to having like 5.5 heroes instead of 6. Um, let's see. Is there anything else I want to say about him? Actually, I don't know that I can say much about it, but his lore line when you click like a button and it like plays a voice line is amazing. It is hands down the best like lore line ever. But yeah, you guys are in it for a treat once you get to hear some of the stuff that Valve has put into this game. It's looking very polished. But if I was forced to rate Meepo, I think I'm gonna have to just give him I'm just gonna give him a 1. Because I feel like anytime, even if you could find a combo with him, at that point, it's like I'm sure there's another blue hero that could basically do the same thing. I don't know. The It's a little bit too easy to kill heroes in this game. So, unlike in Dota, where if you're a good player, you can kind of, at least in pubs, you can kind of keep all your Meepos alive. In Artifact, it's much, much harder. So yeah, just a 1, guys. He's a gold feed for your opponent. Continuing with the trend of atrocious 5 health heroes, we have Prelix, the 3/5. I want her to be good, but she isn't. So it is really cool that if she's in a lane, she will bring another creep into that lane. So, that's a pretty big deal. It's another 2/4 unit. It's a 50% increase from the normal amount of creep spawned. And then her barracks is 5 cost, summon a melee creep into the lane that you improve each deployment phase. Now, I'm going to ignore her hero card, because when you compare that to a card like Dimensional Portal, it's kind of pathetic. But, the cool thing is you can cast it from a useless lane, per se, into a lane that matters. So the 5 cost isn't that much of an inhibition at that point. Her passive is what really brings value to the table. If you can keep her alive for multiple rounds, then it's extremely good. You're getting an extra creep each round. But once again, 5 health. So if you have some magical way to just keep Prelix alive every round, then I think she could be good. The way I think this would work is that you maybe spawn her second. You look for whatever lane you just killed a hero in. Maybe you're starting with like 3 red or something. You kill a hero round 1, and then you toss Prelix in. But in any case, you just toss her into whatever lane you're already ahead in, and if you're running red with her, then maybe you got some gold and you were able to buy a robe. You toss that robe on her immediately. She survives. You start getting this stacking creep effect. That's the only way I see her being played to much effect. So in that sense, I'm tempted to give her a 3 and not just a 2, because then again, maybe not, because while she can bring in extra creeps into blue, that doesn't do a whole lot because AoE. But I don't know. I'm tempted to think that you could get a ton of value out of her passive if you just played around it right. I don't know. Maybe it is just 2.5 or 2. In any case, she definitely forces you to play around her passive, or she is terrible. And next we have Skywrath Mage, 3/6. So you're looking at slightly better stats than some of what we've seen. Not 5 health, not 2 attack, but still kind of pathetic. He has Concussive Shot, which is an active 2. Choose a hero and make it and its neighbors -2 armor, allied neighbors. So that's pretty good actually with blue. If you have some weak, low damage effects, putting that -2 armor on them, now all of a sudden you play maybe 2 damage spells or something like that, and you're looking at 8 damage instead of 4. That's pretty crazy. However, the problem with Concussive Shot is that in order to use it, you're giving up your initiative effect. So let's say you get into a lane and you go first, and you could cast a card like Annihilation to clear out your opponent's units, or you could cast a card like Mystic Flare, which is his hero card, but instead you choose to cast Concussive Shot, and then all of a sudden your opponent's like, duel, Skywrath is dead, and then you're like, well, I'm so glad I cast Concussive Shot instead of playing my spell first. And that's the problem with him. And for all of you, people are going to be like, Annihilation doesn't deal damage. Yes, I know. That's a bad first example. But in any case, if you can make use of Concussive Shot, then I think that this hero is going to be amazing. So I suppose I should also go ahead and read his Mystic Flare text. So deal 12 damage evenly divided among units and its allied neighbors. Just to be clear, if it has no allied neighbors, or if it has one allied neighbor, then that 12 damage is going to be 6 or 12. So it is pretty versatile in that sense as a card. Um, as far as where I would rate Skywrath, I'd actually rate him pretty high, just because at least in limited he's insane. Because in limited your opponent doesn't have access to as many removal cards. They're not going to have Axe, Legion, Phantom Assassin, and all these other crazy heroes every game. And in that sense, you can afford to play Concussive Shot and then use your spells. In Constructed, however, he begins to fall off a little bit just because you don't gain much value from Concussive Shot. However, it can be very good in Creep Warfare. So if you cast that on a hero, and it's maybe not like a super important round because it's kind of an even trade at this point, you don't need to wipe their board. You cast Concussive Shot, now the creeps next to him are going to die instead of surviving. That can be pretty good. I don't know. Mystic Flare has a little bit of issues competing with some of the other AoE spells. I think that the 12 damage divided becomes extremely weak into red because they already have armor reducing the effect of that damage. So if you're looking at splitting 12 3 ways and each of those units has a couple armor, it's going to be very bad. However, into blue, Mystic Flare is actually very good. So overall, I think I give Skywrath probably a 3.5. Solid, lots of potential, probably more like a 4.5 in limited, to be honest. But in Constructed, you just can't reliably use this Concussive Shot as much as you'd like to. And finally, we have Zeus. And yes, I know that I'm missing one or two blue heroes that have been revealed after this, but I will be covering those heroes later on once I've already done all these videos, just because I want the flow to make sense between my videos and Swims. You watch Swims, you watch mine, they cover the same cards, you're good to go. But in any case, let's go ahead and talk about Zeus here, who is quite good. He has, once again, a mediocre blue stat line, but it is better than some of the other blue heroes. It's not going to die instantly to everything, but it will die to a lot of things. His passive is pretty good. So each time you cast a blue spell in a lane with Zeus, he's going to deal 1 piercing damage to his neighbors. And that's actually quite good. Buffing the effect of all of your blue spells by 1 damage is just extremely good, especially when you consider that it avoids armor. And that's not all. He also has a crazy good hero card, Thunder God's Wrath, which for 7 mana deals 4 piercing damage to each enemy in all lanes, or each enemy hero. So it's not hitting the creeps, but hitting the heroes is definitely enough. It's going to be a really powerful effect. And if you know that you have Zeus, or if you know you have already drawn a Thunder God's Wrath, you can set up some really crazy, powerful turns. So you can make some choices that may normally seem suboptimal, but you kind of set up as many of your heroes, enemy heroes, as you can at within that 4 health threshold, and your opponent will know this is coming potentially, but it's kind of unavoidable in a sense, unless they can gain initiative in that lane that you're trying to cast Thunder God's Wrath from. It won't work as well if you see your opponent has a ton of items because they probably have a heal effect or some health effects. But if you can, refrain from killing some heroes, just hit them low enough, and then the next round you cast Thunder God's Wrath to wipe 4 heroes, you're looking at potentially 2 full rounds with 4 heroes gone. Because you're killing those heroes, like if you cast this from the front lane, you're killing them for that round. They won't respawn next round, and then they'll respawn in the round after that. So if you can kill even 3 heroes with this from the left lane, you're looking at probably a 1 game. So the upside of it is crazy. However, if the meta has enough high health decks and enough, Stonehall Cloaks running around or whatever it may be, then this suddenly begins to fall off. However, we should point out that this is actually really good at killing units in Zeus's own lane because it's going to deal 5 to the people or his neighbors. Overall, though, Zeus has a crazy good package. His passive allows him to get a lot of value out of cheap blue spells, especially blue spells like Cunning Plan that, don't really do a whole lot, are just like cantrips. They're manipulating your opponent's arrows so that they're not hitting the right units. You're swapping your own units, swapping their units, whatever you're doing. Typically doesn't do a whole lot. But now with Static Field, not only are you saving Zeus, you're also winning the creep combat because his effects are damaging the creeps. You cast 2 blue spells, now your opponent's creeps died in 1 round essentially instead of 2 hits. So that combined with the ability to potentially just straight win the game with the Thundergod's Wrath for multi-kills is extremely powerful, and I'm going to have to give him probably a 5.0. It may seem crazy that this is the blue hero I choose to give to 5.0 to, but I just think the ability to, from the left lane, before your opponent can do anything about it, wipe multiple heroes from the board is just crazy. Because as I said, it's 2 full rounds where these heroes are off the board, and multiple heroes potentially. If you can set that up, that is just such a crazy upside, and it's really not that hard to gain value from it, gain ordinary value, just sniping a hero or two from it and reducing all of your enemies' health counts. It should also be mentioned that if you can ever cast 2 of these, then like, yeah, it's if you draw 2 of them and you can get a blue hero in the left lane, blue hero in the middle lane, and maybe your opponent was in the middle and right, it can be crazy. Yeah, that being said, it is much worse played from the right lane because then you don't necessarily gain the benefit of the cross lane effect because they'll have actually done something in that round potentially with their heroes. So yeah, as you can tell, I definitely like Zeus. That being said, he might not belong in literally every blue deck just because 7 is quite expensive and sometimes you need your blue heroes to bring in earlier game cards like Akana, who brings in a card that costs 4 and doesn't clog up your late game. Especially if you're already bringing something like 3 Annihilations with your blue heroes, adding in a Zeus with 3 7-cost cards might not necessarily fit. But if you can make him fit, then he is definitely worth running. As far as my final thoughts go, I have to say blue is a very interesting color to pick heroes for. Most of the heroes are extremely weak, but have really powerful effects. Even the bad heroes. Meepo gets multiple blue heroes, right? He spawns additional heroes. Crystal Maiden gives you a global effect that like increases how much mana you can spend in every single lane, right? Like all of these blue heroes, even the weak ones, bring crazy strong effects and incredibly weak bodies. So it's really fun building for blue because when you're picking heroes, it feels like you're really picking, like your picks are making a much bigger effect on your overall deck strategy than something like picking a red hero. Is. I mean, red, you're basically like, oh, Axe and Legion are good. Everybody else is like, meh. You know, Bristle's pretty good with Axe and Legion. I'll move on, right? You're looking at black heroes, and you're kind of like, there are some cool effects in here. But then you get to blue, and you're like, oh, I could go all out super wide with Kana. I could try to pull some crazy mana combos off with Crystal Maiden. I could try to, you know, reduce everyone's armor and then hit them with low-cost spells. Skywrath Mage. I can summon additional heroes with Meepo. Like, if you get what I'm saying, like, blue is really fun to deck build for just because of that aspect. But because of that, they're actually going to be really weak and limited just because all of the value in the heroes is in their kind of archetype that they support, their like style of play. You need these surrounding cards, and you also need a lot of the common cards, the generic like Annihilations, to just really make blue heroes' weak bodies worth it. As far as where I think they belong in the metagame, I think they definitely are more of a mid to late game, you know, color. It should be obvious with how much wave clear they have. However, there is a little bit of potential for some early game spam. I just think that those strategies just aren't as good because it's so easy to counter them in a sense in Artifact. Cards like Annihilation are really hard for a spam deck to deal with. It's really hard to win before round 6, and then they can just click the reset button and kill everything that you've been tossing out there, and you'll be at a massive card disadvantage most likely at that point. So for that reason, I'd say they probably belong in mid to late game control decks. I really personally like the black-blue control and gold, mainly because the gold can give you just this way to close out the game, and the blue effects that wave clear are actually massive gold generators. So when you annihilate a lane with 2 heroes and 5 creeps, you're looking at 15 gold. So they combo really well, and in the sense that you're waiting to get these items. So you're going late game, you're waiting to get these big late game items, and you have tons of stall effects that are also giving you the gold to afford those late game items. So if you can go something like Payday in one lane, and then go, Annihilation in one lane, and then Payday in the next lane after you gained all that gold, you're looking at immediate, potentially 2 Vestures. As I said, if you hit 2 heroes, that's 10. Hit a few more creeps, you're looking at, 13 more gold. Maybe you already had 6, now you're at like 19, and you're just like Payday, 38. You get to the shop phase, and you're like, Vesture. That's my favorite blue list. But beyond that, I also kind of like Kana strats that do try to do some crazy things with her Hound of Wars and buffs. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time with the blue card analysis.